India is set very nicely in terms of being able to create a big impact world over. There are four things which are coming together. The first one, of course, is the digital rails that are already in place. We have seen platforms like ONDC, we have seen platforms like Aadhaar, UPI. They've created huge impact at scale, right? 500, 600 million people using these, and therefore it's naturally easy for any new program to scale under that core principle. The second, of course, we have deep engineering skills. Jaya mentioned that quite a bit in the previous panel discussion. India inherently has this whole ability to engineer new platforms, build, create, right? And therefore that kind of, lends itself to a good position. Third, of course, is the ability to handle complex programs, whether through the Jugaad thought process or through fundamentally reimagining. The country has been, over the last 3 to 4 decades, been always involved in complex domain programs across industries, and therefore that sets us when the AI takes off in a big way. And the last but not the least, the ambition that India today has, the young India, the young country that we are. I think it's a phenomenal, confidence levels and, the ability to think sovereign, ability to think at scale. I think it puts us in a good pedestal, right? So these four things are coming together. The opportunity is fairly significant, the potential, everyone's talking about that. But I believe that all the potential can be realized if there is a, huge amount of focus on how do we reach the end game. Right? And the end game, achieving the end game is hugely dependent on the whole process of how. And we believe there are 3 factors, and I want to cover our core experience across these 3 factors. How you work is very, very crucial. The panelists before, Jaya from AMD kind of spoke of, there is a humongous focus on all the human-machine interaction and what outcomes we deliver from there. So how you work is important. The second work is how you build and scale is also important. What components goes in, what is the target problem statement that you're solving, how you're solving it. And last but not the least, once you build your AI, how do you scale it? How do you run it sustainably? It's not a 6 monthly program. You've got to run it sustainability for generations to come, because it's a humongous opportunity and it's an additive and a compounding impact, right? So therefore, these 3 hows is what I'm going to focus on, with how you work as the first one in the age of AI, where we want to lay more and more trust on AI being able to deliver repetitive tasks, complex tasks for us. Today, we end up focusing on doing more. And this is the first duality I want to talk about. Remember, I said that, my experiences of doing both. I'm seeing that there are 2 common themes. There is a duality in every action. And the first duality here is, we polled 100 plus companies and we realized that 7 of every 10 companies were focused on using the advantage of productivity to do more of the same. So engineers are churning out more code. There is the measurement of impact of AI is only through a number of lines of code written by AI, number of new features launched, the feature velocity, productivity of engineers. So the whole focus is on doing more of the same. Whereas if you really see, the power of AI is also to use the productive time to creatively think different. Can you be the outsider in your own industry and think creatively? And there are very, very few examples that you typically take today in today's world where this is successfully happening. So the duality is that while we should put our trust in the 40% productivity or whatever number you take, right? Because everyone keeps talking about whether the real productivity is 10%, 20%, 30%. Whatever, productivity you get, the time that you have extra, the efficiency, you should deploy in creating, newer customer journeys, the ability to think outside the box, the ability to think as an outsider. Remember, the EV industry would not have happened in the ICE car industry, right? It came as an outsider into and completely disrupted the auto world. The same can happen in your industry. The same should happen in your industries. The customers expect companies to provide better product every day. And yet, the current focus of AI is to just focus on productivity, doing more of the same, trying to reduce the cost. So that's the first duality where we have to shift from the 40% productivity leading to 60% more work to 40% productivity leading to 60% creatively reimagining your target customers industry. You're creatively reimagining your own enterprise. And we have seen that successful examples in the creative agency, creative world, right? And there's an example of how Da Vinci would have, this very, very nicely laid out that while he would get down to the real creative work, all the technical work, all the adjacent work will be done by his teams and the people that he was mentoring. So that's one important aspect and the shift that we are seeing in today's world. The second one is how you build and scale. In the data center panel discussion, we heard that there is a tremendous amount of progress on the platform and the technology side, but they felt that not enough use cases are there, right? So you see enterprises today focusing very highly on creating a platform that provides scalability. It has guardrails embedded, it has got consistency of architecture, it has scalability. You could kind of build quite a few use cases on it. On the other side, we see enterprises who are only focused on building use cases. Use case in HR, use case in finance. And then they say that, hey, my agentic AI is not consistent because HR teams built some AI agents which are architecturally very different compared to what the finance team built. And therefore, the CIO and the CISOs, the security officers, are having a nightmare. So suddenly the duality here is that, most enterprises are trying to work only on one. 6 out of every 10 companies that we polled said that their focus is to democratize AI, give AI in the hands of everyone. And then they had, one large bank said we had over a weekend created 650 AI agents, but we could not see how to deploy them because it was just, people trying their imagination and not really being able to put into production and, create or solve real problems of HR, finance, customer experience. On the other side, as I said, many companies, many startups today that we come across for partnerships, they come and say, we have created best-in-class platform. It can, do a lot of data management. But to what avail? What problem of the customer is it solving? And therefore, we believe that enterprises who are looking at using AI to create unparalleled benefits must take the advantage of this second duality, which is do both. Ensure that there is a platform that can give you guardrails of security, trust, responsible AI, but also be able to solve the use cases of the industry. And perhaps this is where a lot of if you look at futuristic investments, what we call as the domain language models, where the use case kind of combines the business problem, the domain side of the world, and the language model and the platform enable the scalability across the target audience, right? So therefore, this duality is very, very important as you scale AI across the enterprise, and not just focusing on one of the two. Many companies in excitement to implement AI just get started in either creating A or B, but we feel that that's the wrong approach. The how of it is to be in that duality of doing both. An example here is, if you look at Wikipedia, it's a good example, right? It kind of created an open source platform, and it created complete democratization of information and knowledge because there was a platform available and credible editors could edit into it. And it suddenly became the knowledge source for the world. People did not have access to Britannica. There was a closed approach to knowledge when we were in the whole using of Britannica for Britannica Encyclopedia for knowledge management, right? So therefore, from that system to an open source yet scalable and a platform plus a use case approach really helped citizens, individuals, curious folks get answers to the questions they had, right? So that's the difference between the scalability of what we saw with Wikipedia compared to Britannica Encyclopedia. And that's what we recommend when it comes to building and scaling. The last learning I have is on how you run. So when you've built your AI across the organization, there is an important element of sustaining it, and that depends on the slides keep moving very slowly. Do I point here? Still haven't solved this. We need a small language model for this. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So how you run, this is very important because sustainability is crucial. And sustainability will come from when you look at not just the product, the AI product that you have built, but also the adjacencies around it. And one big example is the cost structures. Today, again, 9 out of every 10 companies that we poll, they are in the process of building AI in the way they calculate the cost is very traditional. So they look at how many agents have I built, what is the cost of building agents, and then they have separate contracts to measure the cost of infrastructure, cost of AI, and things like that, which makes it very unpredictable. If I am a business owner and if I scale AI across the organization, chances are that I might end up churning more tokens and therefore I get more, end up paying more cost, more money for the same problem that I'm solving. And somebody asked that question about efficiency versus efficacy. And therefore, we very, very strongly believe that when you're looking at sustainable running of your AI product, you should also not just focus on what features you're launching through it, but also be able to look at the adjacency around it. Today, we have seen that the data ecosystem is very, very crucial for AI to be, giving near accurate results, right? Our brain is tuned to deterministic outcomes. AI will produce probabilistic outcomes, and this whole data drift and the ability to make sure that AI is grounded is more crucial, right? So therefore, the third duality here is that you should not just build features and the product, but also look at actively adapting to what's the ecosystem looking like. Can I create a commercial ecosystem which provides my customer a predictable cost? And therefore, for the new age SaaS companies who are coming out with AI products, it's very, very important that you provide customers a predictive way of knowing what would be the cost of running AI in the enterprise, and not just running a POC, but running and scaling across the organization. So that to us is the third duality as you kind of scale AI across the enterprise. The first duality was how you work, 40%, 60% principle. The second duality is how you build and scale, which is not just use cases, but also platform. And the third duality is how you run, which is not just your product, but also the ecosystem around it. And the example of this third is, if you've heard about the Vikings, right? They were the most fearless of all human, species, and the earlier avatars in the 790s. They kind of went in ships, which was called the Osberg's ships. And the beauty about those ships was, while the ships were very, very powerful, they were very light, so they could move 70 to 100 miles every day compared to the other ships which could move only 20 miles a day. And not just that, while the product was good, they could also repair it on the go. They could use the product on high seas, as well as they could navigate it. They could send men over rivers, right? So rivers have lower depth, seas have high, and therefore the ability for the ships to navigate on open waters in seas as well as shallow rivers was very high. So the adaptability of the product was so much that they could defeat the British, they could defeat the French, they could defeat multiple countries, and expand their reach, their territory, their power. So that's another learning that we have to draw from, that the adaptability and the duality around how you run the ecosystem is very, very crucial, and not just focus on building that particular ecosystem, right? And commercial example is something that I mentioned. So these are the three things I wanted to cover. Just want to leave you with what we are doing at TechM to um, to manage this duality. So key elements of TechM's approach. The first one is our duality. So we, as you popularly know, we have our own platform called TechM Orion, which seamlessly enables you to build and scale agents in the enterprise. At the same time, we have democratized use of AI, so everybody can create their AI agents, deploy them into production, and use that benefit in HR processes. For example, today there are two functions at TechM that are actively using AI to engage and have better and efficient process, the HR and sales, and that's what we are doing. And of course, in terms of contributing to the ecosystem, we have created something called service tokens, which gives you predictable cost when you're deploying, building and scaling AI in the enterprise, right? So that covers not just the cost of building, but also cost of running the AI application. So in summary, what is the call for action? Call for action number one is when you think of utilizing the time saved from higher productivity due to AI, think of what are the new roles you want to embed in the enterprise. And there was a question again in the previous discussion as to what new roles. And we believe that there are lots of these creative, non-tech roles which will come into being, which will enable the team to be an outsider in the company and create a disruptive, positive disruption to enable completely new customer journeys, sometimes new products, and sometimes new business models, which will create unparalleled value for the industry, right? So think of what new skills you want to induct in the team, and not just do more of the same, because our innate habit is to continue to do more because we are now getting more productive. So we do more with the same. The second call for action is again the duality of doing both: build use cases, create the domain language model on a platform which allows you to scale. And the last one is to be able to very quickly adapt to the ecosystem. I think this will set the differentiation for you as an enterprise or you as an entrepreneur, because we're seeing that companies which are able to very quickly adapt in the ecosystem, provide more predictable costs, are able to use and deploy and scale faster for their customer segment. And then and therefore this is really sticky. Okay, and therefore this duality we believe is not a choice, but it's a must-have within your enterprise. It really differentiates you and not just creates a foundational element, right? So that's the one sentence I wanted to leave you with, which is focus on the duality. Sometimes we end up being very parochial and focusing on one thing, but we strongly believe that if you do both, the ability to scale AI across the enterprise is very, very high. Hope it made sense, but these are some of the experiences I wanted to share in this short time. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for the insightful session. So, back in the old days, I think when we used to, as in when companies like Tech Mahindra or say Infosys or Wipro, when we get onshore works, so the real key metric used to be how many people will be in the team and how many hours will be used or man hours will be used. Nowadays, we see the trend of tokens, how many tokens will be consumed. But my fear, and I'm not a tech guy, so I'm just looking it from the outside. So my fear is that we are at the same inflection point where probably T20 started in 2007-8, and players were playing T20 with the ODI bend of mind that last 5 overs may will slog. Prior to that, we'll play slow and steady. And probably the time is to completely rethink and do. Would you like to throw some light on that? Am I wrong or?
No, no, absolutely, it's right. When I look at it, and today I have 40,000 people in my hierarchy, but the biggest challenge is not to think numbers anymore as an industry, right? When we started the journey about, when Gen AI became fashionable 2.5 years back, the the adoption curve was very small. People would be curious but very tentative. People would be asking more questions than testing it out, right? But I see that that has completely changed now. Humongous transformation has happened. The amount of acceptance that people have in adopting this new world is very very high, and particularly in nations like India, where people are generally quite keen to do something to kind of help them in their task, and which is where my first learning was that we have gone so fast that we are only focused on doing more of the same rather than redefining it. So I think the first one is, and this is a big win for the industry because it will take, and you rightly said that when T20 came in, this whole thing of, oh, there is some time and we'll use the last 4 hours, but the adoption was very fast. We are seeing that the same curve is now starting to happen. The initial tentativeness, and listen, this is the first time that a tech services company or an industry would focus on probabilistic outcomes for their customer. We have, the customers trust the industry with their brand. Imagine if you launch an AI into production for a bank, and the AI chatbot, because it is probabilistic, tells you that the home loan is at 3% and not at 9%. It dilutes the, it kind of creates tarnished brand for the company, right? And therefore there is amount of carefulness that we have to depict. It's not a casual, on the sideline program, and therefore that took some time for the industry to kind of make sure that there are enough guardrails, the trust in the system, responsibility. And as that happens, the skilling, reskilling, the learnings from doing some things early on has gone into the industry. So that's number one. That's the first shift that we are seeing, which is positive. The second shift we are seeing is on the customer side as well, where customers are now coming and saying, let's do this. We have also thought about it. We have also now understood what the strategy should be. And therefore, more customers are now lining up. So for the industry, what we are seeing is more and more companies that were tentative are now coming to the forth and saying, let's help us build, help us reimagine. Can we do things differently so that we can go from a position of 3 or 4 in the industry to position of 1? And that hopefully gives us more business as the industry, right? So the per unit size of the deal may go down, but the number of deals, number of customers lining up is quite significant. So that's the shift we are seeing. And of course, the reimagination point I said in the learning, which is we must become more creative at how we reimagine the business model.